No one disrespects you by accident, and maybe that hurts a little to hear. But most of the time, when they provoke you, ignore you, or try to belittle you, it's not because they're strong, it's because you're too available. Available to react, to explain, to prove, to justify yourself. And the more you do that, the more you lose something whose true value few understand: control. Niccolo Machiavelli already made it clear: politics guided by reality, not by ideals. And the reality is simple: whoever needs the approval of others has already entered the game losing. Now, let me ask you something, and answer honestly. How many times have you responded to something that deep down you didn't even need to? How many times have you entered into discussions that only drained your energy, without giving you anything in return? What nobody teaches you is that silence, when used correctly, isn't absence. It's strategy. It's the kind of movement that doesn't show, but completely changes the dynamic. Because while everyone is trying to speak louder, justify themselves better, or prove their worth, there's another way: to disappear. And not in a physical sense, but psychologically. To stop reacting, to stop feeding, to stop giving away attention for free. And this is where a counterintuitive truth comes in. The less you try to be heard, the more people start listening to you. The less you explain yourself, the more people try to understand you. This isn't a coincidence. This is real human nature in action. And when you understand this, you start playing on another level. In this video, you'll understand exactly how to use silence as a tool of power. Not that passive silence, the kind someone keeps quiet out of fear, but active, strategic silence that creates doubt, discomfort, and repositions your presence. You'll see how to break the psychological mirror, generate ambiguity of status, create invisible barriers, and ultimately, completely reverse the game. Because at its core, it's not about manipulating others, it's about stopping being manipulated. And when you learn to control your own reaction, you realize something that changes everything. The power was never in what you said, but in what you chose not to say. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He begins by realizing something most people completely ignore. Every provocation only exists because it finds a reflection. It's as if the other person throws energy in his direction, and when there's a reaction, be it irritation, justification, or even a simple look, it comes back as confirmation. This is exactly where one of the most silent principles of the prince comes in. Decisions based on real human nature, not ideals. Human nature needs a response to validate its impact. Without it, something breaks, and it's not in the other person, it's within himself. When someone tries to provoke and finds only silence, the mind short-circuits. Was I not relevant? Did he not care? This emptiness begins to corrode more than any discussion. It's counterintuitive, but profoundly strategic. Silence is not absence. It's an invisible positioning. And here's a practical insight. The next time someone tries to destabilize you, don't respond immediately. Breathe. Count to 5. Sometimes the absence of reaction is already the greatest answer. And interestingly, this begins to create something bigger, a silent doubt in the other person. Now, observe a common scene. Someone makes a passive-aggressive comment at work or among friends. Most people play along, responding, trying to explain themselves, or even retorting to avoid looking bad. But not him. He simply doesn't react. He neither agrees nor disagrees. He just continues as if it has no weight whatsoever. This behavior, which seems simple, carries an advanced level of politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Because in practice, those who react relinquish power. Those who don't react steal the stage. And without a stage, there is no spectacle. This doesn't mean being passive. It means choosing when to use silence as a calculated use of force. A practical example, provocative messages on WhatsApp. Instead of responding immediately, wait hours, or don't respond at all. You'll notice something interesting. The other person starts to back down on their own, sometimes even sending another message softening their tone. This happens because, without your reflection, the psychological mirror breaks, and when it breaks, the other person loses control of the narrative. And here's the most subtle and powerful point. When the mirror breaks, it's not just the provocation that's lost, it's the point of reference for impact. The other person no longer knows where they stand. They begin to wonder if you ignored them out of weakness or superiority. And it's in this space of uncertainty that something dangerous is born for the one who tried to hurt you: the loss of control. This connects directly to another principle that few truly understand. It's better to be feared than loved, but above all, avoid being hated. Well-applied silence doesn't generate immediate hatred. It generates discomfort, doubt, and over time, respect, because whoever doesn't react seems to be on another level of the game. But this absence of reaction creates something even more interesting: a gap. And every gap naturally demands to be filled. And that's exactly where the next movement begins, when silence not only breaks the mirror, but begins to distort the very perception of status. He begins to realize something that completely changes the social game. When there is no reaction, there is no clear reading of position, and this, for the human mind, is extremely uncomfortable. People are constantly trying to understand who is above and who is below. It's automatic, almost instinctive. But when he remains silent, this reading fails, and this is where ambiguity arises. Did he ignore it because he didn't know how to answer, or because he simply didn't consider it relevant? This doubt creates an unstable psychological field. And, as Niccolo Machiavelli already taught, everything revolves around perception. The appearance of virtue is often worth more than reality. Silence, in this case, acts like a fog. Nobody knows exactly what's behind it, and this takes away people's confidence to act with trust. A practical example: in meetings or group conversations, when someone tries to provoke you and you don't engage, the atmosphere changes. Others start observing you more than the person who spoke. Now think about the invisible dynamic that happens after that. The person who tried to provoke you starts to question themselves. It's no longer about you. It's about them. Did I overreact? Did it look bad on me? This reversal is powerful. Because while before they were trying to put you in an inferior position, now they no longer know where they stand. And when the hierarchy isn't clear, the brain tries to solve the puzzle, but it can't. This generates tension, and tension generates error. This is one of the most underestimated aspects of the calculated use of force. It's not about attacking, it's about leaving the other person directionless. A simple exercise he applies: when someone tries to measure strength, he responds with total neutrality or simply changes the subject as if it were unimportant. This completely breaks the other person's expectations, and frustrated expectations generate instability, and instability opens space for advantage. And the most interesting thing is that this ambiguity begins to expand beyond that specific moment. People start to see you differently, not because you said something, but because you didn't say anything. This creates an aura of unpredictability, something directly linked to the idea of virtù and fortuna, the ability to adapt and act according to the moment without being bound by predictable patterns. And when you are not predictable, you cannot be controlled. But this also has a strategic side effect. The less people can read you, the more they hesitate before acting against you. And this hesitation is pure gold in any social game, because whoever hesitates is already one step behind. But this uncertainty doesn't stop there. In fact, it begins to generate something even more intense, an invisible barrier that prevents any direct advance. And it is precisely there that silence ceases to be just ambiguity and transforms into silent resistance. He begins to notice that silence, when consistently sustained, ceases to be merely an absence and transforms into a real barrier. Not visible, not physical, but absolutely felt. It's like trying to open a door that won't budge, no matter how hard you try. The other person pushes, insists, provokes, and nothing happens, no reaction, no sign of impact. And this frustrates on a deep level, because the human mind needs feedback. It needs to know it has been heard, perceived, acknowledged. When this doesn't happen, a growing discomfort arises, and here enters an essential principle of politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Whoever controls the response controls the rhythm of the game. Silence doesn't respond. It imposes a limit without needing to say a single word. And this is powerful because it cannot be confronted directly. You can't argue with someone who simply doesn't engage. A practical example, that person who insists on arguing via text message. The more you respond, the more they continue. But when you stop, their momentum begins to lose strength. Now, observe what happens over time. The person who was used to receiving a reaction begins to wear themselves down. Each unanswered attempt becomes a small failure, and these small failures accumulate. It's like someone banging on a wall, hoping that at some point it will give way, but it doesn't. And this generates emotional exhaustion. This is the true calculated use of force. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency. It's not about raising your voice or proving a point. Just don't give in. And this requires something few people have: inner control. Because the natural impulse is to respond, to defend oneself, to explain. But they understand that by doing so, they would be opening the door again, so they keep the door closed. A simple exercise. When you realize someone is trying to pull you into a repetitive conflict, don't respond to everything. Respond less, then even less, until silence becomes dominant. You will notice how the other person begins to lose energy. And here's the most strategic point of all. This invisible wall not only blocks, it redefines the dynamic. The person who previously came at you forcefully now encounters resistance, and without realizing it, they begin to slow down. Initiative diminishes. The frequency of provocations drops, because deep down, nobody likes to invest energy where there's no return. This connects directly to the idea of avoiding being hated. Silence doesn't attack, but it also doesn't allow progress. It's an almost perfect balance, but this lack of response doesn't disappear from the other person's mind. On the contrary, it begins to occupy even more space, because what isn't resolved isn't forgotten. And it's precisely at this point that something deeper begins to happen. Silence ceases to be an external barrier and begins to transform into an internal weight within the mind of the person who tried to hurt you. He begins to understand a phenomenon that few manage to perceive in real time. Silence doesn't end when the interaction ends. In fact, it begins there. Because when there's no response, the other person's mind finds no closure, and the human mind hates gaps. So it tries to fill them, it goes back to the scene, mentally repeats it, creates hypotheses, simulates answers that never came. It's like an echo that never stops reverberating. And here's the most subtle point. A direct answer would end the cycle, but silence prolongs it. And it prolongs it silently, constantly, almost invisibly. This is what we can call delayed psychological gravity. It doesn't happen in the moment. It happens later, when the person is alone, thinking. And this has much more impact than any confrontation, because it enters the territory of decisions based on real human nature. Human beings don't suffer so much from what is said, but from what remains open. A practical example? That discussion you simply didn't answer. Hours later, the person who spoke is still thinking about it. You aren't. Now, observe how this grows over time. The more the mind tries to resolve the unresolved, the more energy it invests. And the more energy it invests, the more importance it gains. It's a cycle, a mental loop, and silence feeds this loop effortlessly. This is extremely strategic because it shifts the emotional weight of the situation. Before, the tension was on you. Now, it's on the other person. This is the true calculated use of force, making the other person carry the weight of the interaction. They don't need to react. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need to win an argument. They simply don't feed into it. And this creates a curious effect. The other person begins to give more importance to the episode than they themselves do. A simple exercise: when someone says something that clearly seeks a reaction, try not responding at that moment. Observe. Over time, you will notice how the other person tries to return to the subject or changes their behavior. This is gravity at work. And here's the most interesting point. This gravity not only holds the mind captive, it expands perception. The person begins to analyze not only what happened, but who you are. Why didn't he respond? Wasn't he shaken? Don't I have an impact on him? And without realizing it, they begin to mentally reposition you. And this connects to a classic principle. It's better to be feared than loved. Not out of explicit fear, but out of the silent respect that arises from unpredictability. Because those who don't react aren't easy to decipher, and those who aren't easy to decipher aren't easy to reach. But this mental process doesn't remain contained. At some point, it overflows. And when it overflows, it reveals something that was previously hidden. Because without your reaction to serve as a shield, the other person begins to expose themselves more than they should. He begins to see something that completely changes how he interprets conflict. When he doesn't react, he no longer protects the other person. It may seem strange, but that's exactly it. When someone provokes him and he responds, a smokescreen is created. Attention shifts from the initiator to the exchange, but when he remains silent, that smokescreen disappears. And what remains? The initial attitude, raw, exposed, without defense, without distraction. This is directly linked to the idea of the appearance of virtue. Many people rely on their reaction to appear justified. Without it, they are naked before observers. And here comes an extremely practical reading of human nature. Decisions based on real human nature, not on ideals. People observe, always. And when only one side acts and the other doesn't respond, it becomes evident who sought the conflict. A simple example: in a group, someone tries to provoke you and you don't engage. The others begin to notice, not you, but the behavior of the person who provoked you. Now, what happens next is even more interesting. Without your reaction to balance the situation, the provocateur tends to escalate. He tries again, then again, and with each attempt he reveals more of himself. The tone rises, the intention becomes clearer, the mask begins to fall. This happens because he expected a game, attack and response. But without a response, he loses the script. And in an attempt to regain control, he exaggerates. This is a powerful strategic point in the calculated use of force, not interrupting the other person's mistake, letting them expose themselves. A practical exercise: when someone makes a mild provocation, ignore it. If they insist, remain neutral. Observe how, in a short time, the person themselves begins to commit to what they are doing. And the more they commit, the harder it becomes to back down without seeming inconsistent. It's a silent psychological game, but extremely effective. And here's the most refined point of all. By not reacting, he not only avoids conflict, he repositions the collective perception. People begin to associate him with control, stability, emotional dominance. Meanwhile, the other person begins to be seen as impulsive, unstable, even needy for attention. This creates a subtle inversion of power. And as Machiavelli already said, avoiding being hated is as important as being respected. Well-applied silence does exactly that. It doesn't attack, but it also doesn't submit. But this exposure isn't the end of the process. In fact, it's just the beginning of something bigger, because when someone realizes they can't get to you, they start treating you differently, with more caution, more care, and, in some cases, even with silent respect. And that's when the game changes level. He begins to realize that there is a type of power that doesn't need to be demonstrated, only felt. It doesn't come from words, nor from confrontations, nor from visible victories. It comes from the absence of reaction. When someone tries to provoke and finds no emotional opening, something changes in perception. It's no longer about what was said, it's about who wasn't shaken. And this conveys a silent but extremely strong message. Here, you have no access. This type of posture is deeply aligned with the idea of virtù and fortuna, the ability to remain firm, adaptable, and in control regardless of the circumstances. Because, in the end, whoever controls their own reaction controls themselves, and whoever controls themselves is rarely controlled by others. A practical example: in competitive environments such as work or business, the one who doesn't react to provocations is quickly perceived as someone difficult to destabilize, and therefore is treated with more caution. Now, what he understands over time is that this emotional immunity doesn't need to be announced. It reveals itself naturally. People start testing less. They avoid certain comments. They think twice before attempting any provocation. Because deep down, they realize there's no going back. And this generates respect, not that forced respect based on explicit fear, but a silent, almost instinctive respect. And here comes an essential principle. It's better to be feared than loved, but intelligently. It's not about intimidation, but about conveying that you are not easily affected. This completely changes the dynamic. A simple exercise he applies. When he receives a provocative criticism, he doesn't react emotionally. He either responds with extreme calm or simply doesn't respond. This predictability and self-control creates a powerful image, because while many react impulsively, he remains stable. And stability in social environments is synonymous with authority. And the most interesting thing is that this authority doesn't depend on status, title, or formal position. It stems from behavior, from patterns, from the consistent repetition of not reacting to what doesn't deserve a reaction. And this connects directly to the idea of constant adaptability, knowing when to act, when to speak, and above all, when to do nothing. Because sometimes the greatest move is not to move, but this emotional immunity generates an inevitable side effect. Whoever tried to provoke you starts to change their strategy. Instead of acting, they start observing. Instead of attacking, they start waiting. And without realizing it, a silent role reversal occurs. Whoever previously sought your reaction now depends on it, and it is precisely at this moment that the game completely changes. He begins to perceive the exact moment when everything reverses, and curiously, there is no obvious external sign. There is no announcement, no final confrontation, just a silent shift in dynamics. Before, it was the other person who provoked, pulled, tried to extract a reaction. Now it is that same other person who begins to wait. To wait for a response, a look, a minimal sign of attention. And this is where the most powerful shift of all happens. The one who waits loses power. Because the instant someone starts to depend on your reaction, the balance changes. And this is not theory, it's real human nature. People want validation, they want impact, they want to feel they can affect you. And when they can't, they begin to desire what they previously tried to force. This is the point where silence ceases to be defense and becomes dominance, an invisible dominance, but absolutely real. Now, observe how this manifests in everyday life. That person who used to provoke you starts acting differently. Maybe they send neutral messages, maybe they try to start a conversation in a lighter way, maybe they even change their tone completely. Why? Because they lost access. And when someone loses access, they start to value it. This connects directly to a classic principle. The end justifies the means, not in a crude sense, but in strategic logic. The goal was never to win the provocation, it was to reposition the game. And they achieved this without confrontation, without wear and tear, without exposure, just with silence. A practical exercise. Notice who insists on getting your attention, and consciously reduce access. Respond less, be less available, don't explain yourself unnecessarily. You will notice something curious. Some people distance themselves, but others get even closer, and this reveals who was really seeking connection and who was seeking control. And here is the closing of this invisible cycle. Strategic silence has never been weakness. It has always been control. Control of time, energy, perception. One doesn't react because one doesn't need to. One doesn't respond because one shouldn't. And one doesn't expose oneself because one understands the value of the appearance of virtue. Not everything needs to be said, not everything needs to be shown. This creates a different presence. Denser, harder to read, harder to reach, and in the end, more respected. Because in a world where everyone wants to speak, whoever knows how to remain silent dominates. But there's an important detail. This silence is not empty. It is intentional, strategic, and above all, conscious. Because when used unconsciously, it becomes detachment, but when used with precision, it becomes power. And it is precisely this kind of power that separates those who react from those who lead. Now let me ask you something direct, and perhaps uncomfortable. How many times have you sacrificed your peace for someone who didn't even deserve your reaction? How many times have you over-explained, over-answered, over-involved, and in the end, only come out more tired? The truth is simple, but few have the courage to face it. Whoever reacts to everything is controlled by anyone. And if you've gotten this far, you've already realized that silence isn't about running away. It's about choosing. Choosing where to put your energy, your attention, your presence. Because in the end, your attention is an asset. And like any valuable asset, it shouldn't be distributed indiscriminately. Now think about this in practice. In the next provocation, will you respond as always? Or will you try something different? Will you play the game, or will you observe the game? Will you try to prove something, or will you let the absence of reaction speak for you? These are small decisions, but with enormous impact, because every time you choose not to react, you reinforce a pattern. And that pattern builds an image, a presence, a silent authority. And over time, people notice, they feel it, they adapt. Because, as Niccolo Machiavelli already said, the most powerful decisions are those based on real human nature, not on what should be, but on what really is. So now, I want to hear from you. In what situation in your life do you most feel you react without thinking? Work, relationships, family, and what would change if you started applying this strategic silence from today? Write it in the comments, because sometimes putting it into words is already the first step to changing the game. And if this type of content made sense to you, if it gave you a new perspective, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you won't find pretty phrases. You'll find strategies that really work.